An area that is known to harbor some scary things. So I'm just going to start kind of walking down in this area. And Adam, Keenan, Trad, if you guys want to talk a little bit about how this process began all those months ago on defining good combat for Ashes of Creation.
Sure. I would say, it starts with, all of the hundreds of thousands of hours, cumulative hours of MMO we have under our belt, right?
We have a lot of hours of MMO gameplay under our belts collectively.
We just got to push a couple buttons and we're immediately like, oh, it feels good or it doesn't feel good.
It's funny, Keenan, actually, you say that. One of the you guys all know this because every one of you went through an interview with me, but one of the qualifying aspects of joining the team is, what type of MMOs do you like to play?
Nice. Yeah, so it starts there, and then from there we sort of do our research. We have to take a look at the state of the art, and then we study it. We form hypotheses about what exactly it is that makes things feel good or not feel good, and then we make those things in as controlled a manner as we can. And then we turn the knobs, we tweak things, we see what feels good, what doesn't feel good. We come up with some rules, some processes, and then we put them to the test. And this is what comes out.
Yeah, it's a very iterative process, right? Like, none of these things are like you form your theory on paper and then you go and you make the thing and it comes out to be exactly what you see now, right? Like, it starts out the first time not super great, and then what we have to be able to do as engineers and designers is identify what is not great about those things and then just continue to iterate on those things. And that's, as long as you keep making it better each time, eventually you're going to end up with something good.
Yeah, and for this exercise and finding what makes Ashes great specifically, we wanted to approach it from the ground up, answering individual questions about our hypotheses and what we think is good, right? So we really focused on individual aspects that we think makes good combat and answered them one at a time in a very tight iterative process. And we ended up at something that we think feels really, really good. So
yeah, just playing this, I am loving the hit reacts, the visual effects, all the ancillary components that go into making the combat, but more importantly, the pacing of this kind of heavier weapon group. Also, as a side note, outside of the combat, one of the things I've not necessarily liked about MMOs traditionally in the past is that excuse me, every portion of land is covered by some type of monster, right? And it kind of gives you this weird feel. But here, like, this is a very dangerous area that we're in, the environment, and part of it gets communicated by the aspect of these rocks and like the specific types of materials that's represented here, but you don't know exactly where the threat lies per se, right? You kind of move up into an area, and if you move too far, you get the audio cue of the monsters like arising. Your character gets into the combat stance. They have some really cool aspects of animation. The animation team did an amazing job with the rolls here. I am loving, and also they're like death effect, just like swinging away and then flying off. That is so great.
Yeah, I really like the camp feel of this area where you don't just see these guys scattered around all over the world. No matter where you go, there's like something that's gonna aggro you. It's more like, I'm gonna grind here for a bit.
Yeah, Steven, you were talking about how you like how heavy the sword feels, and that weight impact, that is one of the combat pillars that we have been studying and honing in on in our development process. The other side of it is The other side of it being also like agency, to what extent does this weapon respect your intentions? And that's the part that's important to me. I'm a classic player. I come from traditional MMOs, right? Like I want to be able to move and attack at the same time.
Right. Yes. And that was a huge point of feedback actually that we received during Alpha 1, was that we started with this more root motion approach to the basic weapon attacks. And ultimately, we called an audible mid-test. I remember it was in that end of July or beginning of August month, where we decided to implement a completely split body approach and get player feedback. And of course, the feedback was very positive, resoundingly positive, right? That players prefer that agency over that weightedness, but there's a little bit of a conflict there because they also didn't like the floaty feeling which comes along with not having the weighted approach. So how did that play into your guys' defining this current approach on the weapon attacks? How did you blend those two?
Yeah, so we kind of approached it from looking at player agency primarily, as Keenan had said, and the games that really handled player agency the best are those like classic MMOs, right? Players really like how smooth the classic MMO feel, how much player agency they get out of it. And then we took that and we tried building this sort of impact and weight on top of it, really making attacks feel satisfying, making it feel like the inertia of the weapon and your movements are accurate, physically accurate. And we accomplished that through a number of ways. Really, again, talking about the process, we tried identifying each individual aspect of what we got out of these, more modern action games, and tried incorporating that into our classic MMO base. I think it all comes down to looking at it not as a binary of, are we doing split body or are we doing root motion combat? It's looking at everything as modular pieces and then dialing in those numbers to make something that feels high in player agency, feels very impactful, like it has a lot of inertia, it feels very physical.
Yeah, my litmus test for agency in combat is take any moment in combat, pause time, look down at your hands, look at the keyboard. The buttons that you're pressing should be the directions that your character is moving. So with these weapons, even though there are little bits of root motion here or there, they're always respecting your WASD input, and I think that's what makes them feel good.
I think another thing that you guys did that helps with that is the timing of which that gets registered, right? Like, it's not, at one iteration we had it where it detected what your input was at the beginning of the attack, and that just felt like if I decided to change my mind and go left instead of right in the middle of that attack, it's too bad. It already kind of queued that. And so I think now what you guys are doing is having it happen at like swing time, right?
Yep, it's constantly looking at your input and adjusting.
Now I've equipped these daggers, this dual wielding, these dual daggers. Talk to me a little bit about the differences between the heavier weapon group and the light weapon group.
Yeah, so initially in our investigation, we wanted to start with the light weapons to figure out how to really blend the weight of an attack and introduce, or start with player agency and then introduce that weight of the attack into it. We figured the least risky weapon to start with would be the lightest weapon possible, little daggers that move very fast, very high player agency, and not necessarily focused on big weight, much like a heavy sword. So we started with that and tried introducing little bits and pieces here and there, like small bits of root motion to get that nice like dashy feel in when you're attacking, and play into that inertia. I know Keenan might want to talk more about the animation timing sheets we introduced for figuring out these timings that feel good.
Yeah, that's part of our process for communicating cross-department is using frame timing diagrams and being specific about how we not only want to animate, but also how we want to move during different frames of the animation. And we found that to be very successful. But one of the things that makes the daggers different than the sword is that the daggers never really slow you down. They're both respecting your directions, but the swords will actually slow you down at certain times. Like leading up into the strike, your split body movement is sort of blending down towards 0, and then you strike, and then it blends back up toward to 1. The daggers are not doing any blending like that. You're just split body, and then you're striking, and then you're back into split body. It's like a seamless process.
Yeah, I'm just playing with the directionals here. I mean, on the animation team, they did a phenomenal job. I'm loving the kind of foot placement and movement, the strafing feeling on the body there. I know Alexi did a lot of work on the IK as well, that we can see like when you're, kind of stepping up different portions. It feels really good to play.
Oh yeah, considering how physically based we are and animation driven our combat system is, it was super important that the animators, get all of that right, and they absolutely knocked it out of the park. I mean, one of the biggest things I think to making good feeling attacks is getting all of the departments involved in what feels good and on the same page, right? Getting everyone iterating. So, like in the process, we started with chopping up animations to build an ability that we thought felt good. And then we wanted to pass that off to animation to finalize those animations by chopping up our abilities and making animations that feel good. And then we can all loop everyone back together and finalize that ability. VFX has the same process too. So, it's a bunch of different departments iterating on a very micro scale to build something that is just awesome.
Yeah, the animation team definitely had to take a deep breath when we went to them like, hey, those 3-part weapon combos that we like so much? We want different ones for each direction that you can move in. Oh, and also you need to be able to weave between the directionals at any time.
That is pretty funny. One of the things that's interesting and is always a point of contention for those of us who have perhaps played different games and have become accustomed to specific visual representation of these damage floating text, right? And I want to showcase a little bit. I'm going to let them hit on me for a little bit just so you can kind of see. Directionally, damage you take, which is indicated in this red number, floats towards your left-hand side. And when you do damage to a target, they float to your right-hand side. Now, one of the very important aspects of these floating texts is providing the player with customization options that they can adjust the size of the floating text. They can adjust the color composition on how these texts are represented. They can also include damage icons to indicate the ability that's used for those floating text. And importantly, excuse me, we also call out the crits that you do in a separate way, how they pop in. They're slightly above those, the other numbers. And then more so, we also have additional functionality for cumulative damage values. So I'm going to kind of go through that. You'll see here as I press, different option. Now we've changed the colors. Whoops, hold on. Let me see. Make sure. Is that color going off differently, or do I not have my... Hold on.
Still yellow.
Is it? Okay, let me try this very quick. Oh, maybe that's not. Hold on, let me find a different monster. I hope that's working. If it's not, we can show that a little later. Let me press this button. Oh, here we go. Okay, so you see the color is changing now, and that's something that the player has agency over, right? You can assign different types of colors that you want. That was changing. I think the one I was pressing actually was changing the size. So let me try to change that size again. There you go. You can see that size now is larger. You can showcase XP if you want. You can bold in the numbers a little bit as well. But providing kind of maximum flexibility and character customization, player customization options for these floating text, I think is super important. But I love the way that they feel, that kind of classic, very almost, what were we saying, Keenan? Very vanilla vibe.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes the best flavor is just vanilla.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Yeah, but the UI team's done a great job on the functionality for that. I think it's feeling pretty good. Yeah, that's very cool. So, where are we now when it comes to kind of the spectrum of light to heavy attack options on these basic weapon attacks? What's kind of next for this as we showcase it to the players?
Well, I think we've sort of defined our spectrum with the light and the heavy when it comes to agency versus weight versus impact. When you look at the heavy, I think we're close to saying that this is sort of the most we want to compromise agency for weight and impact. And once we have that upper bound, we can sort of play with all of the different intermediate points, right, as we start to build out other weapons. But we have interesting explorations as well in how all of this translates into ranged and also ultimates. We might take the limiters off for ultimates and just see what the coolest things we can make are.
Yeah, that's going to be pretty interesting. Another component, by the way, of defining kind of this weapon attacks is also the visual effects side, and weapon trailings, the intensity of those weapon trailings, how they scale based on the type of weapon, the level of weapon that you have, but not just the trailing on the weapon per se, but also the ground decals. Like for this heavy weapon, that first strike, you see that kind of that decal in the ground is, I love that look. And even on the backswing, like when I hit the ground behind me, it's causing that decal.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff gets down into the really low-level systems details. Like, we want to pass the artists as much information as we can about actual combat ongoings so that they can inform the effects as precisely as they can, or as precisely as they need to, rather.
Yeah, and we really wanted to build on a technical side. We really wanted to build the combat system to, like I said earlier, be as physical as possible. So we have it very animation driven. Everything is handled based on a reference of animation as opposed to like nebulous timings, right? Which allows it to feel very impactful and very responsive. So when you hit the ground decal actually appears on the ground when it should. That's something that may not be seen in other MMOs. So we really wanted to make a big focus on that and focus on the responsiveness.
Yeah. One thing I failed to mention, by the way, apologize for that, is actually you guys are seeing the Pyre male for the first time in game. I know we've showed him on the stream before as these character races get further fleshed out, but here you're seeing him in full flesh and blood, so to speak, virtual flesh and blood, I guess, in the game. And that's pretty cool to see. I can't wait for players to kind of get a look at the customization options and the character creator for this race. Also, another thing that's really important, I think, is the audio component. And Kat has done a phenomenal job in both the sound design for creatures as well as for the weapon. And actually, you guys haven't seen anything yet because we have a lot in store on that front that I think is going to be pretty cool. And it's all part of the presentation, right? It's all part of what makes combat feel good, is also the auditory component in that. Talk to me a little bit about the capabilities that the audio team has when it comes to accessing combat and the abilities.
Yeah, similar to VFX, we plan on piping in a lot of information. That's something we've been working a lot on recently, is tooling for VFX and sound effects, right? It's a super important part, as you said, of the package in order to sell that weight and that immersion in the game. And there's going to be a lot coming online, so I'm really excited to see what we have in store for that. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever show it on stream, but we're building a sort of singular tool that all of the teams can use to build abilities and tweak them. Sound effects, visual effects, animation, design, engineering, all using the same tool, grounded in animation, to build these abilities. Yeah,
absolutely. Another component, Adam, which you guys worked on, is camera controls and adding. Talk to me a little bit about the kind of visuals that are provided through these additional camera controls for abilities in combat.
Yeah, so I mean, the word of the day has been impact and weight, right? And a lot of that is sold through what the player sees. You know, we didn't want anything to be nauseating or over the top, and you know, certainly people can adjust it in option settings, but we wanted something that would sell a lot of the weight without, you know, being too over the top and too sort of cartoonish, right? And so we implemented a few different camera effects, you know, things like camera shake, radial blur, and a few other things involved, and really tried to maximize you know, our bang for the buck with those to sell the weight of these attacks. And it really adds a lot, especially I've noticed a lot of how your peripheral interprets the weight of the attack really sells it for me as a player. So that's something we've been focusing on, and it's made huge improvements to the feeling of these attacks.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. So, looking forward, as we continue to flesh out both the medium melee weapons, and we'll be showcasing our ranged weapons in combat in a future stream, we're also going to be talking a little bit about and showcasing, which you guys got a little sneak peek on a few abilities, some class kits and the ability systems as a whole, and what we're able to accomplish for Alpha 2. Of course, you know, we promised at the beginning of this year that you guys would be getting some pretty exciting showcases of all the work that's being done on the project towards Alpha 2. You got that with the character creator, you got that with the seasons and weather systems. Now you're starting to get a little bit of touch on the combat side. And I know that there's a lot of stuff that design has been prepping around, you know, the work that's been done on these class kits and the different archetypes that are going to be playable across Alpha 2. But there's a lot in the store, and there's a lot of functionality that the engineering team has provided our designers when it comes to both the functionality of certain types of abilities as well as the synergies possible between them. You want to talk a little bit, Adam, Keenan, and Trad, about what's possible given our ability toolkit?
Definitely.
Man.
I mean, so this whole, you know, prototype process has been kind of, you know, two steps. One of those steps was what, you know, Adam and Keenan were talking about a bit there with, you know, their hypotheses on, you know, what makes good feeling combat, and they've done a great job on that. But the other side of that was also just, you know, coming up with these almost mock class kits. And, you know, the idea was this might not be the final class, but there will be things that we can take from it that we like, and then get rid of that we don't like, and let's just make something. And you guys have kind of seen some sneak peeks of that already from the Assassin and you know, previous stream, and now you're seeing something from the Weapon Master. That was the other one that we took just to experiment with and contrast these different types of combat. And what I was kind of going for here was, you know, getting class synergies in place where, you know, maybe, you know, for example, you've got a thing that if you kill someone with one of your other abilities, it'll reset the cooldown on one of these abilities. And there was a lot of that kind of stuff going on in this kit, whereas there wasn't so much of that interaction in the kits in, you know, the previous alpha. It was an area that we felt we could really improve. And the good thing about that whole exercise that we did is we came up with a lot of cool abilities. You're not seeing them all here, but they, you know, what it really did for us is it developed our tools, because we realized, oh, we can't do this or we can't do that. And so like the designers and Adam and Keenan here would kind of go back and forth and say, like, you know, designers need to be able to do this particular thing that we can't currently do, and then they would take that and they would make it possible in the tools. So we're really putting our best foot forward here. That way we are going into like the full class design. We're going to have a lot of stuff that we need to hit the ground running.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
oh, go ahead, Keenan.
Oh, I was just gonna sort of build on Trad's point. Like, all of these exercises, or throughout all of these exercises, we're very careful on the ability system side to make sure that when we're adding something new, we make it as modular as possible. We really want to think of these abilities as being made out of like Lego pieces, not being sort of like molded from a single block of clay. So whenever we are trying something and we build something new, that's a new piece that we have to explore and combine with all of the other pieces that we've already made.
Absolutely. The other thing that's important, is important probably for players to understand with regards to Alpha 2, is that this is another testing ground, right? Alpha 2 is a test, and in Alpha 2, we're going to represent components of the class kits and the ability system that may not make it to launch, but it is a perfect area for us to kind of get both player feedback as well as for us to log data around its usage, its impact, its feasibility as essentially a component of our class kits, right? We're going to be experimenting a lot with regards to that for Alpha 2. So it's very exciting.
Oh, definitely. We're just getting started.
Yes, absolutely. Well, guys, this has been a fun stream. I think I really enjoy obviously talking about this stuff and showcasing the hard work that you guys are doing, everybody on the team is doing across everyone that makes combat a fun and tactile thing for us to play with. There's a lot that goes into it, but I think the team is hitting it out of the park with these showcases as we show, essentially what our quality bar is for Ashes of Creation. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in and watching. Please make sure, it's very important that you guys give feedback with regards to kind of what you saw today. It is always something that we are iterating upon, but generally based on what feedback we already received out of Alpha 1 and the pursuits that our engineering side as well as our design side have been examining and playing around with, we feel really confident in this approach for the basic weapon melee attacks. But we want to hear your guys' feedback, what you thought of today, so make sure to comment both in the YouTube section as well as on stream, on our forums, on our Discord, Connect Everywhere. We value your feedback very much. It is an important part of creating Ashes of Creation. And remember, this is a work in progress. This is something that we are still expanding upon, something that we are still improving. It is never truly finished, but of course it is getting close to Alpha 2 ready. Thank you guys again for tuning in. Adam, Keenan, Trad, thank you guys for being a part of it. Always appreciate the insight and the talents that you guys bring to Ashes of Creation as a game. We're very happy to have you guys. So everybody in chat, give hearts for our awesome guests today, and I will see you guys back on stream.